Welcome to
Tamarindo Podcast.
Hosted by me, Brenda Gonzalez, a fitness coach, political nerd, and nonprofit capacity builder.
And me, Delcy Sandoval, a Guatemalan-American licensed therapist and passionate creativity advocate. Together, we're here to uplift our community through powerful conversations with changemakers, creatives, and healers.
Each week on the pod, we talk politics, culture, and personal development. Listeners call Tamarindo the Advocacy and Self-Love Podcast. Vámonos! Let's start the show!
Hello, Tamarindo listeners. Hi, Brenda.
Hey, Delcy. Happy to be here again. ¿Qué pasa contigo?
So nice to see you, Brenda. You know what? It has been kind of a whirlwind. For one, I watched this presidential debate, and my God, I'm sure you have reactions. I have reactions, but also been traveling a lot. And I got kind of stuck due to inclement weather. And it was like 3 days in a row that I couldn't get home. And so I'm really happy to be back. And I'm happy to see you. ¿Y tú qué piensas? Did you watch the debate?
Yeah, what an ordeal, right? What an ordeal for your travel. But yes, I did watch the debate. I had the good fortune of attending a local Latinos for Harris team or group. So it was great to do it in community. So I watched it at Best Cantina, which is a Latina-owned amazing restaurant in downtown LA, with community. It was so fun because we were booing, we were cheering. So it was great to be in community, but it's like, wow, I cannot believe how low this guy can go. So as everybody else has been doing lately, I posted a picture with me and my dog and just saying like, me and my lunch, I'm going to eat my doggy.
I can't.
What did you think?
You know what? Interestingly enough, because I did get stuck longer than I thought I would, I got to watch the debate with my little sister. And we were just, the two of us, we took it very seriously. We sat down, we were ready for a serious adult debate. And then very quickly, it just turned into escándalo. We were cracking up. We were like, is this for real? And I said, you know what? If it wasn't so serious for the future of my people and my country, I wish I could just, like, in 4 years, if this is over, I want to rewatch this because it was outrageous. I could not believe what I was hearing, and especially kind of the stats that were being thrown around that were just very random, talking about executions of babies that were born.
The fake stats, right? The fake news, the lies.
Yeah, these lies that just didn't make any sense. And I felt for the moderators who were kind of fact checking in real time, especially when
they did an excellent job. They did an excellent job. Kudos to them. Matracas to them.
Matracas to them. Yeah. And imagine Brenda having to fact check the cat and dog statement. I can't even imagine having to do that.
And to have to do it with a serious face, face, and his rebuttal being, I saw it on television. Wow. Just a disgrace. But even what's more disgraceful is that there are still people that are going to vote for him. There's still people that not and don't even do it in a way where they're like, oh, he's the best we got. No. They're enthusiastically voting for a monster that says something as ludicrous as immigrants are eating your dogs and your pets. What a disaster. So that's really that's a real tragedy, is that part.
And tragedy is a good word for it, because there was a part of the debate where they were talking about mass raids. And, I grew up in East Los Angeles in the 90s, and we had mass raids at that time. And I have some pretty vivid memories of some of these buses showing up to the neighborhood and what that actually looks like. And so the scary prospect of what they're talking about, it was just awful. And so it is quite a big tragedy that this is even on a national debate.
Yeah, and that makes me think about one of the guests that we're going to hear from a little bit later from now. We're going to hear from Paola Mendoza, who's a film director, art activist, author, artist, all kinds of things, right? There's so many of us that are hyphen. But she's going to talk about her latest book, which paints a picture of a terrible version of the country, but really it's not that far off. It's really not that far off. It's a world in which people really, truly, everybody truly believes that immigrants are as vile as Trump believes it. And here we have a serious candidate. And so even though when I was reading Paula's book, it felt like, oh my God, this is terrifying. it really is, after today's debate, or the debate we just watched a few days ago, it makes me realize that actually that sort of world could become reality. So you'll hear from Paola Mendoza in a little bit, but before that, we have a fabulous panel conversation. So our panel, we have Hugo Gamino, a storyteller at heart and a chef by trade. So as a chef and writer, he's dedicated to sharing the untold stories behind the recipes that have shaped his life and career. And his writing is fostering understanding and bringing to life an empathetic viewpoint of diversity. And what I love best about Hugo Gamino's work is that he's challenging toxic masculinity, and he's helping us reimagine a different way to embody manhood. And I love that. I love that about him.
Yeah, you know what I really love about Hugo also is that you think about the amalgamation of all of his skill sets here, right? Like he is an artist at heart, a writer, a chef. He's also been involved in fashion and so on. And you see all of those different worlds together in his content. And it's quite spectacular to think about food through that lens. And from the artistic perspective, such a personal way to talk about your own story, because you learn a lot about Hugo from watching him talk about food. You learn a lot about his mom and how he was raised and all the cities he's lived in. And so I love that we can see it all kind of in one place, this merged essence of Hugo.
Yeah, and how creative to use cooking videos, which are so calming, and like a lot of us watch cooking videos and save them. We're never going to make the recipe, but we still save them. They're still aspirations. So
why are you calling me out then, though? Why are you calling me out?
Everybody that's listening, I know it. I know you saved that recipe. You are not going to make it. Don't kid yourself. Okay, so besides Hugo, we also have LA-based writer, director, and actor Claudia Restrepo, who is passionate about minority and queer representation, both in front and behind the camera. So she recently executive produced and starred in the film Peak Season. And though it's described as a romantic comedy, what I found most compelling about Peak Season, its departure from rom-com tropes. You can watch it today on Prime. So Hugo and Claudia join us as we talk about their approach to storytelling and the barriers that Latina folks continue to face in creative spaces. And you'll learn a little bit more about their journey. So it's a super fun conversation. So let's hear from Hugo and Claudia now.
All right, I'm so happy to be sitting down today with Hugo Gamino and Claudia Restrepo. It's wonderful to get to chat with both of you. I'm going to have each of you answer this question, and I think I'll start with Hugo. Can you briefly tell us what you do now, and what is your personal why?
So my name is Hugo Gamino. I am a chef and a writer. I'm still getting used to kind of considering myself kind of like a content creator, I guess you could say. But I like to lean more into the writer and chef role. I create content around food. I cook food, and basically I use those food and that recipe to kind of as the vessel to tell these stories that I want to tell about not only myself, my background, my history, but a lot of the times like the industry of like the hospitality industry, right? So, and my why, I would say I am a person that desperately needs to be creative, and I needed a creative outlet, thanks to, years of being with my therapist like 3 years ago, and we kind of came up with a plan that I needed to have something for myself that didn't have like a monetary value attached to it, and it was just for me, and it was a creative space that I wasn't worried about what kind of money would come from it, because every job that I've ever had in my life, I was creative, but how did it sell? How did it move? What's the, how is it pushing the audience? So I started cooking and writing and putting my work out there, and it's been a very my why is it's my therapeutic kind of outlet.
Yeah, that's very well put. So Claudia, tell me, what do you do? I know you've done a lot of different things. What do you do now, and what is your why? What fuels you?
Yeah, I'm a writer and director and sometimes actor. I've worn many hats. Right now, primarily a TV writer. And my why is ultimately to entertain and like offer fun escapism. Like, I think everyone has hard times in life, and I have almost always turned to some form of entertainment, whether that was a book or a movie or music. And I think art provides, like a mirror for what we're going through, but also just like a place to escape when like you really need that. Some TV characters have felt like my family and best friends, and I, work to provide that for other people. I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the what the arts do for us, right?
Yeah.
We absolutely need to turn to them. I want to stick with you a little bit, Claudia, because I just got finished watching your feature film, Peak Season.
Oh, amazing.
In which you get to act, and I have to tell you that I was very captivated by the story, by your character. I feel like I felt all of the emotions, and I can't spoil how I felt at the end, but I felt all of the emotions. And I want to know, what was it like to embody this particular character?
First of all, I'm so glad that you went over that sort of emotional journey with Amy. And yeah, I have a lot of similarities with Amy. I feel like I often feel like I'm straddling two worlds socioeconomically, and Amy, I think, definitely feels that way. Feels like a lot of responsibility for the path she's on, a lot of guilt for, maybe daydreaming of abandoning that path. And I think as someone who is in the arts, in an industry that can sometimes almost feel selfish because it's so chaotic and like not very stable, I really related to her feeling of like, am I doing what I want? Should I pivot? Like, I think artists feel that, have that question always. That program's always running in the back of your head. So I related a lot to that. Yeah. And in a lot of ways, I was very different from Amy. She's a management consultant. She's, not really a creative in a lot of ways. But in another life, I think I definitely could have, been close to that character, followed that path.
Yeah, lovely story. I can't wait for more people to get the opportunity to see this great film. Now, for you, Hugo, you talk a little bit about this, how you've had like very distinctive creative paths. You went from culinary to fashion. You've been able to explore. Now you're exploring, content creation and even getting comfortable with that word, with that phrase. What advice or what has worked well for you to kind of jump from these very, very seemingly different paths?
Honestly, I think for me, what's been my kind of navigating kind of North Star is being as transparent and as vulnerable as possible. And especially within the arts, I think that there's many times where as a chef or a designer, you're putting yourself out there, and, to kind of Claudia's point, you're putting a lot of yourself in these like things that you're writing and producing, and you're putting it out in the world. And a lot of times you're like, is it gonna hit, right? Like, and I think at the end of the day, what's worked for me, and I'm still working on it daily, and it's not easy. It's okay, I feel proud of this work. I feel proud of what I wrote. I feel proud of what I put out. It might not get viewed. It might not get the reaction that I want, but as long as I am putting out work that speaks to me and that means something to me, I have to be okay with that. I have to be okay with that feeling of like, I have the opportunity and the privilege to create when I do create, right? Because you do kind of go into this hole of like, does my work even mean anything? Like, nobody's seen it. It's kind of like it lives in space. Like I always say, like I write these stories, and a lot of times like it's something that's like super personal to me, but it might not hit, right? But as long as I'm putting it out there and I was like, man, I'm really proud of that. I think that that's like the only advice I can give is like, you got to have some sort of like inner okay within yourself that like, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, but you are producing. And as long as you are producing work, like for yourself, like you're moving in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. Does that resonate with you a little bit, Claudia? Like just kind of like staying focused or grounded, and like as long as you're feeling happy with it, maybe that can ease some of the anxiety or fear that we might have about how others will receive art.
Yeah, definitely. I often feel like I have so many projects, and like they sometimes feel like they're for different sides of myself, or literally different people. Like I'll have a project that I feel like this is serving a more general or mass audience, and like that's serving one part of like my interests, and I'll have something that feels like so personal and like niche and small, and maybe will only reach a certain demographic, but that's okay if they get to see that like that's for them. Or something, you know, I do a lot of other art forms that are literally just for me. They're not going to go on the gram. It's not even a video. It's like it's something else that just like feeds my artistic soul. But absolutely, like you need those things that sometimes feel like just for you, because it's important to feed your own creative soul, and not worry of sort of like, you know, what the larger media landscape is looking for, because that changes all the time. You will never satisfy the beast. Like you kind of sometimes just have to satisfy yourself.
Yeah. Does that relate to you as well, Hugo?
Yeah, I mean, I think to that point where, you know, you create these projects that you're like passionate about and you want to do, right? Like a lot of my writing is a lot of trying to break the kind of mold and barriers of like male masculinity, of like what machismoism is, right? Like I talk about abandonment issues in my stories. I talk about, you know, infertility, like things that are not necessarily like super out there all the time. And I always said to myself, man, I really want to get published one day, and I really want this to go out. But like, if it's not going to happen, I need my work. I want my work to be out there. And if it's going to be out there, you got to be ready for, it's not my cup of tea, man. Or yeah, this isn't it for me, right? So yeah, there's a lot of times, like to her point, Claudia, like you have these projects that are like niche for certain things, and then these ones that like are for you, you're very guarded and protective of them, and you're just like, I don't know if I want to put this out there to the world. Like I don't know if this is there's so many stories that I've written that I haven't put out because I'm like, man, that's too personal to me, that I don't know if I'm ready for it. I don't know if I'm ready to put my work out there and get completely emotionally annihilated by people that don't receive it the way I'm putting it out, right? So it's just like, I think that's the hard part.
Yeah, I think you're both speaking to like the vulnerability that it takes to be a storyteller, to be an artist. And well, you know, something that's really exciting to see both of you break into this work and get to do things that you love is that you don't really see too many Latina people getting to do this, right? Getting to be behind and front and writing for TV or for film, or getting to tell their stories, or getting to experience two very different careers like you did, Hugo. So I want to know, what have been some of the barriers that you've faced, or maybe what are the barriers that maybe continue to exist for Latina creatives? Maybe I'll start with you, Claudia.
You know, sometimes I feel like a lot of barriers I see are like not having enough opportunities to fail to like develop a creative voice. I feel like I see a lot, like there are a lot of great organizations, or I see a lot of people getting really excited about taking that first step, like doing the fundraising for their, you know, second short film, or like, you know, getting into this incubator, getting into this program. And then it's kind of like a lot of times if that doesn't hit, like it's really hard to sustain ourselves as artists, just financially, like emotionally. I wish I felt like there was more opportunity for people to make mistakes and grow and learn and get second, third, fourth chances, because it takes that to develop your artistic voice. So I just feel like it's not as, you know, people don't offer as many of those chances, I suppose, to people of color as casually as they might to other people. So I feel like I still see that as a barrier. So give people more chances, give them more money, help them make their like third or fourth short film, you know, because they're not getting the Marvel movie after their first short. Like people have to work, do their art, and like grow.
Yeah, and it just kind of talks about like the stakes are higher, right? The stakes are higher for the Latina creative, because there is this, you're not going to have that third or fourth chance like you just mentioned. Yeah, what did you want to add to that, Hugo?
No, I mean, I agree 1,000%. It's like you get your opportunity and you're almost kind of like, all right, man, I got to really focus in on this and make sure it works, because if it doesn't, it might not ever like come again. And I think that, and the other side of the coin of that situation is like scarcity, right? Like if someone does get in a position to be in those, these opportunities, right? They get these opportunities. It's like, man, I scratched and crawled to be here, and now it's mine. Like I elbow, and it becomes like this kind of like elbows out mentality, and it's hard, especially within our culture, right? Like, I believe in this like system of like, if you advance 50 yards, stretch your hand out 100 yards back and really try to pull somebody up with you, right? And not everybody has that mentality, and that I think that that's like the sad thing, right? Like, but yeah, it's so hard because there's so many times where if I've gotten an opportunity to kind of publish or present my work, it's like I have to clear everything out of this, like the schedule, to make sure that this works, that this doesn't fail, that this project like makes it, and that like it's successful. Because if it doesn't, like there might not be another chance. There might not be a second chance.
The stakes are higher. Well, thinking about what you'd like to see more of, because I think you just gave a great example, Hugo, of like maybe more of us reaching back and bringing others when we can, when we think about that. Claudia, what would you like to see more of to kind of help Latinos break into more creative opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, I see a lot of like great organizations that I think are doing a lot of that work, and I don't mean to like poo-poo any of those. Like I think there are some really great places that are, you know, more about like actually providing funds, like not sort of like all talk or like a deadline article. Like they're actually really offering support to young creatives. Yeah, it's hard, I guess, to like pinpoint, because honestly it feels like so systemic. Like I feel like Hugo was saying, like it's hard to reach back when you feel like you're still in survival mode. I feel like I see a lot of like, I feel very mid-career, and I often have to remind myself that like I feel like I'm treading water a lot of times, but that doesn't mean I can't help like a new filmmaker, like meet with them for a coffee and help them like plan their short film, you know, or like edit someone's film for free who like is, you know, struggling to pay an editor or something, but like really needs that first step. So I mean, honestly, it's a reminder to myself that like kind of where you don't have to be like a 3-time showrunner to be supporting or mentoring someone. Like there's at all stages in your career that you can help other people out. So yeah, it might just be a reminder to myself that I can, you know, always offer that too.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think too, as you describe it, like the issues are systemic, and it is. I almost feel like, wow, that was kind of unfair for me to ask about like what can we each do, because truly the onus shouldn't be on the creatives, right? The onus needs to be a little bit on like what's going on systemically. Who are the gatekeepers? You know, what are the barriers that are out of our control, because they're mostly out of our control. So I think that's a really good point for us to think about. Like this is really more systemic. I know, for example, the Congressional Latino Caucus has taken this on about more Latino representation. So we need more of that, right? We need a little bit more of that. But yeah, Hugo, what else would you like to see more of?
To Claudia's point, like I would like to see more stories told, or more, that is just not like the stereotypical stories of us, right? Like I think that we're a broadened culture. I think that I grew up in this generation of like, I held a badge of honor of saying like I'm a hard worker, like I'll work anybody, this. But I think that we've come to an age where we're like, yeah, we're creative too, we're smart too. Like we're not just like the hardworking people, right? Like we are hardworking, and we are also super intelligent. We're also super creative, and I think that that these movies and these stories are being told like my niche and my thing is telling stories that are nostalgic to everyday life that we grew up on, like going to school, or your uncle, or a story of the nopal. And it's just like these small stories that get overlooked on a daily basis. And it's not just like the South 16th Street gangbanger, right? Like I grew up in that environment, and I'm proud of that environment. I'm proud that I like came out of that environment. But there was also like friends of mine that are actors, lawyers, and those stories should be told too, right? Like those success stories as well, right? And I think that there is like I would want to see more of a broadened storyline of our people than just the typical stories that come out.
Yeah, and as you're saying that, I'm reminded again of Amy's character in Peak Season, because in this story is not about her being Latina, but she, like many of us, speaks Spanish to her mother, can, like, that's not the core issue of this film, but yet she's just like a Latina that exists, and I really really appreciated that from peak season, and I'd like to see more of that like there's so many like these are our experiences, like there's so many of us that navigate those worlds, and it is part of our one part of the many complexities that make us up. So love that. Any final thoughts? Like, what do you want folks to keep an eye out? What are you working on right now? Last words for our listeners. Maybe I'll start with you, Claudia.
Yeah, well, peak season, I didn't do a good job of like introducing what it is. It's a lovely romantic comedy set in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. I play the lead, Amy, who is sort of from the New York business consulting side, who's at a crossroads in her life and meets a fly fisherman who she kind of falls for. And it's just a really lovely vacation romance comedy. It comes out on VOD on September 3rd, so you can rent that and watch it wherever. And I'm just so proud of this film. I think it's so lovely. There's an access point for everybody to relate to some character in this film. So rent that on September 3rd. And yeah, on my end, I'm always writing and developing my own work. And right now I'm writing for TV and just doing the thing.
Very cool. Very, very cool. How about you, Hugo?
Just the day-to-day, like cooking and writing stories, but like what I'm in the works of doing right now is putting together a documentary of like the food industry, a particular subject matter of the food industry, like the immigrant worker. I've been in the hospitality industry for close to 15, 20 years, and some of the best and most talented people that I've ever met in the industry are from, immigrants, and not just from the Latino population, but just, from all over the world. I worked in a Taiwanese restaurant, and some of the most talented people that come here and struggle. And that's a story that I'm trying to tell. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. The immigrant communities feed us, right? They feed us in every shape, every way, sense of the word, from growing the food to serving it to us, to cooking it, to creating it. And it's important that we tell their full story. So I'm excited to follow both of you. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate you spending some time with us here on Tamarindo. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Bye.
Next up, we have Paola Mendoza, who many of you may know as the artist, director, and co-founder of the 2017 Women's March. She's directed many projects, including the beautiful film Entre Nos, the semi-autobiographical story based on Paola's mother's arrival to the U.S. from Colombia. This is a great movie. Delcy, I highly suggest you take some time to see this story. It is a real life story, based on Paola's life. But it's this woman who arrives into the country with her husband and their young kids, and he just ups and leaves. With no visa, with nada, leaves her. This is unfortunately a common story, right? And there's despair, lots of despair, but little by little, it really ends on a hopeful note. And it's a really compelling story of Paola's background, and a story that many of us can relate to. But Paola today, she's going to talk to us about her latest book, SOLIS, which she co-wrote with Abby Sher, and it's a companion to their first book together called Sanctuary. So here's what the New York Times says about this book. It is, quote, a story of survival and hope, a gripping work of fiction with a message about xenophobia that's rooted in a scarily real world. As I shared a little bit earlier, especially in light of candidate Trump's vile depiction of immigrants during the debate, we need works of arts like SOLIS to remind us that the dystopian world in the story is not that far from where we're headed if we let this tool win. So let's hear our conversation with Paola.
All right. So hi, Paola Mendoza. It is so good to have you back on Tamarindo.
I'm so happy to be back. It's been a long time. I think last time we talked, we were in the midst of a pandemic, and here we are kind of still in the middle of one.
I know, right? It's so wild. These last 4 years are just have been completely wild. I have lost all track of time. But I know in that time you worked on your follow-up book to Sanctuary. You have a new book out. It's called SOLIS, which I keep wanting to call it SOLIS,
It's SOLIS. It's SOLIS. That's what it is.
It is SOLIS. Okay, yeah. There you go. Okay. So tell us about this new book.
So Solis is, as you mentioned, a companion, a sequel to Sanctuary, and both of these books take place in a dystopian, futuristic United States, where the government is literally hunting undocumented immigrants, and in the case of Solis, is rounding up those immigrants in detention labor camps. And I say that Sanctuary is a book about running away, and Solis is a book about fighting back. And both of these books ask the reader to care about communities that might be their own, communities that are not their own, and more than caring, demanding and asking and hopefully inspiring the reader to get involved in the fight, get involved in making sure that the world that we are living in does not devolve into the scary futuristic United States that we have imagined in both Sanctuary and Solis.
Yes, and it is very scary. So the future version of the U.S. that you and Abby Sher created in this book is quite gruesome. In fact, it reminded me of another book, which I'll show you here. It reminded me of Parable of the Sower, Octavia Butler's book, of just like a very gruesome, horrible future that doesn't, in some cases, doesn't really feel that far off, because other themes here is just thinking about like a drought or other risk factors that can lead us to the type of world that you've painted here. What was the intention behind creating such a scary version of the U.S.?
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing up Parable of the Sower. Parable of the Sower is a major influence in my work as a writer and my work as someone that lives in this world. And Parable of the Sower actually takes place in 2024, which is this year, obviously, that we are living in. And I think the start date was July 24th, 2024 is when the book starts. And so very similar to Parable of the Sower and Solis that takes place in 2033, the reality is that climate change has devastated the country, the world in Solis. And what the government has tried to do in Solis is, I say it in the book, it's going back to its deplorable roots of slavery and making people die for cotton. That's the history of the United States and the current situation in Solis. There's a new mineral that's been discovered, and it's aquilinium. And aquilinium itself is a way in which that allows the government to control weather patterns. And so what will the government do with these weather patterns? And, I have an 11-year-old son, and I think a lot about his generation in that he really only knows the conscious world, since he's really become conscious and aware of the world, a world that is constantly being devastated by climate change. He says it all the time to me, Mama, climate change is scary. And to grow up in that reality that the world that we're living in, our home, is turning in on us, it's destroying us because of the things that we've done. What does that do to your consciousness? What does that do when the world around you, you feel the reality is that it can harm you, it can destroy your life in an instant, constantly, over and over and over. And so really that reality of climate change and the reality of, we started writing this book in middle of 2020, middle of 2021. Donald Trump obviously had lost, but the country itself still felt like it was very unstable, very scary. And here we are in 2024, 4 years later, and we have Donald Trump as a real possibility once again. And it's what he means as a destabilizing force. It's what I believe he will be, an authoritarian in this country, and what that does yet again to these young people that are dealing with climate change and then have to live and grow up under an authoritarian regime. What does that do? So that is the basis of Solis, and it's put just slightly in the future because I do believe that we can stop it. I believe that we can stop an authoritarian from rising up into power, and I also believe that we can, if we really wanted to, lessen the effects of climate change.
Yeah, so there's a lot of warnings, right? A lot of lessons that we can take from this book. And as I was reading it, I had to like, whoa, put it down a little bit to be like, gosh, that's so gruesome. But just exactly as you alluded, if you kind of sit and think of the gruesome history of slavery and a number of different horrible, deplorable instances in inflection points in U.S. history, this really isn't that far off, right? This really, really isn't that far off. And of course, as you mentioned, I can't believe that we actually have a candidate that's a real legitimate candidate with many people supporting him. That is a tenet of his campaign is mass deportations. Just like in this book, we've got the deportation force. So we can take a lot of lessons, a lot of warnings from reading this story. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the process of writing the book, of co-writing. I want to know, what are some takeaways? What are some tips that you might have for someone that is considering working collaboratively on writing a novel, a fiction novel?
Yeah. I get asked this question a lot, and I come at this work as a filmmaker, as a theater artist, as a visual artist of various installations. So I like to dibble and dabble in all kinds of different art, all of which, except for theater, I'm a trained theater artist. I've taught myself. I've just figured it out as I've gone doing and as I've gone to do it. One of the beautiful things about working in all of these art forms is the ability to collaborate. I love collaborating with people. I think it makes me a better artist. I think that it takes a very specific type of person to be able to collaborate. It's a much slower process. It's a much more fulfilling process. It also constantly challenges my ego. So the question that one has to be aware of when they're collaborating is, do I think this is a better idea than the idea that the other person is presenting because it's my idea, or because I think it's better for the story? And that's really the crux of a good collaboration, that both people are working towards what is more truthful and better for the project, not your individual desires for the project. And sometimes those realities are very easy. Sometimes they're much harder to get to. And oftentimes in collaboration, I'll have an idea, Abby will have an idea, we'll be working it out, struggling through, and the better idea will actually be something, exactly.
That's so
totally
funny. That was
different.
perfect.
It'll create fireworks, exactly.
This is so great.
It'll create fireworks. And that's the ideal. So, but just like a relationship, choosing your collaborator is by far the most important thing, because you all just have to be able to vibe together. You have to be able to create together, and creating together is very vulnerable. It's very exciting. It's very scary. Conflict can and should arise. So how do you work through conflict? So it is very much a partnership, like a friendship or a romantic partnership. And I think often that's why collaborators do become romantic partners or do become best friends, because you are in creation with this person. So anyone that's wanting to collaborate, I highly recommend it. Obviously, writing a book in collaboration, especially a fiction book, is not a normal collaboration, but it was very amazing and joyful. And unlike Sanctuary, which was its own kind of different, weird process where we were on Google Docs together writing, I would write, then she would write, and then we would come back, and it was very an amorphous process. SOLIS was much easier in that there's 4 characters, 4 different stories, and so we divided and conquered. I took 2, she took 2, that we wrote the first draft for, and obviously the creation of the actual story was very clearly beated out, beat by beat by beat by beat, the entire story together. So when I would take a character, I knew exactly what was happening in that storyline, and so did Abby. So we had a very detailed map that we were working from in order to write. And then we would switch, and then I would edit her stuff, she would edit my stuff, and then we would go in and write different things. So it was an easier process to explain. but one that was just as equally joyful as Sanctuary.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for walking us through that. I want to go back to something you said, just to kind of impart more lessons for or tips for our listeners. What are some of the things that you might ask yourself when you are inviting someone to collaborate with you, or what has worked for you to kind of like check off, okay, this is going to be a fruitful partnership?
Well, do you trust their taste? So I think that's really important. Do you think that they are a good artist, a good creator? Because you want to work with someone that you think is good and inspiring and that you trust creatively. Are they generous? Generous in spirit, generous in how they communicate? Because you want someone that is going to be generous and listen and hear and build. I think it's important to know if they've collaborated before. Obviously, Abby and I hadn't collaborated writing books. I'd written my own books separately, She'd written her books separately. But she comes also from the theater and does a lot of stand-up comedy. And so there was a natural way in which she was a collaborator. And I obviously had collaborated a million times over. So I think that's really important. And also, if the person has collaborated in the past, have they, continued to collaborate with the same people?
Yeah, like did it end up working out, right?
Yeah. And like, can you have honest conversations? I think you need to have honest conversations with a potential collaborator. And just like it's a vibe thing when you go out on a date with somebody, like, do you have a connection, an emotional connection, and an intellectual connection, an artistic connection? That is really, really important, because you can't fake it like a collaboration. There's nothing worse. I've had one not ideal collaboration, and it's terrible. So you really want to avoid at all costs a bad collaboration.
Yeah, I love that, and I love the framing of being generous as a word to describe someone that can like give you their time, give you their honest feedback. I love framing it as generous. I think that's a really great way to look at that. And lastly, what do you hope people take away from this story?
As we were talking, and we're talking about how dark, how intense SOLIS is, I think it's important to say that while it is dark and intense, it's not dark and intense and sad just for the sake of that. I really believe and it's a pattern in all of my work, actually, that I bring my reader, in this case, my reader or my viewer, if I'm directing films, into the darkness. But not just to stay in the darkness, but rather to then, while you're in the darkness, to see the light out, and to follow the light out. And we can't see the light really unless we're in darkness. And to me, that's what both Sanctuary and SOLIS are about. It's about living in this reality, choosing to be in this reality, because you are choosing to go into this world, into this book, and then hopefully letting the light that's shone in Sanctuary inspire you to show up in our world, which also is very dark and scary, to search for the light, or an even better scenario, to be the light for other people. And so that's what I hope people take away from the book. The author's note that I wrote at the end of the book is essentially that. It is a call to action for the reader, that while our world is dark and scary, that you and they are not alone. There are other people working towards a better world. And just like as a collaborator, you want to find your collaborators, you need to find those people that are working and imagining a better world, and go be with them. Go create this world that we want, because I believe firmly in my heart, in my soul, that it is possible, that we can and will make this world better. And some of those ways are by voting, which is a tool, it is not the end, to make sure that Donald Trump is not the nominee. I'm very clear about that. Also understanding that Kamala Harris is complicated not good on Gaza, terrible on Gaza, and yet I am, and this is a controversial position in some cases, I am willing and able and will do everything I can to make sure that she is the president of the United States. Not because she's going to save us. I don't believe in presidents saving us. I don't believe in politicians. They are not our heroes. We need to actually pull them off of that mantle and make them work for us. And so that is one step towards that. And then also, just as importantly, or if not more importantly, is the work that we are doing in our communities to make sure that we are protected. Should Donald Trump be president, how are we going to take care of one another in that reality and in that world? Because it's a very real possibility.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that and for reminding us all that we can be the light, that we can come to others that are the light and join them. And of course, recognizing that not one candidate is going to save us. It is an ongoing forever journey of being and following the light, and recognizing that definitely one candidate is the darkness. We need to do everything that we can to not create this world that you wrote in, make it a reality, right? This is fiction. Let's keep it there. All right. Well, thank you so much, Paola, for spending some time with us. We can't wait to have readers get their hands on this book. And thank you for walking us through your journey. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for doing all that you do and telling our stories for our community. I appreciate you all so much.
All right, we've had a lot in this episode, so many fabulous, inspirational conversations today. And now it's time for our closing section. So, Delcy, what gets your matraca today?
So today I want to give my matraca to farmers in the world, particularly the farmers in Northern California. I got to engage with a lot of farmers this weekend, and they're really doing the good work. This is hard work, and folks are out here making sure that we have fresh food that is devoid of toxins, that is organic, that is good for our bodies. And lately, healthy, safe food has become further and further and further scarce. So thank you to all the farmers out there. Matracas to you for the work that you're doing to keep us food safe.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Farmers and farm workers, in light of the crazy weather we've been having, wow, like we are thinking of all of them. Well, my matraca is quite shallow, really. But something that I did recently is that my friend Evelyn and I, we're ladies of luxury, we're ladies of leisure. We like to go to pools. So we got a day pass to the Langham in Pasadena, and they just opened up a new pool, and it was quite lovely. So if you're able to take a day off, I took the day off on a Tuesday, knowing that I'll probably not be as busy. And we went together on a Tuesday and just had a fabulous day lounging by the pool. It was well worth it. It was well worth it to get that day pass. So there's my recommendation / matraca. What goes in la basura for you, Delcy?
This has gone in the basura for me before this season. What is going on? I'm just throwing this away every week, which is air travel. I cannot tell you enough how difficult it is to get around right now. I had my flight last week rescheduled a total of 8 times. So you can only imagine the constant delays, 2 cancellations, very difficult. But I think what was even harder was that when I was calling the airline, the attitude was sort of like, well, we don't have options for you. There's really nothing we can do for you. And we're not really sorry about it. Like, this is what it is. And really, I'm not blaming the workers, because I think that the workers are probably exhausted from the amount of people calling about these same issues. It really is the way that airlines are dealing with profits and kind of the way that they're dealing with overselling tickets and mechanical challenges. And so this industry is really struggling. And as a result, I've had a pretty rough go at it. So basura to the current state of air travel.
Yes, in need of a restructuring, in need of some sort of refresher on how airline travel works. Well, my basura is the grip that Christianity has on our country and politics. because earlier we were talking a little bit about the debate and just realizing that there's still a bunch of people that are enthusiastic about voting for Trump. And a lot of what these folks have in common is Christianity. They have this very narrow view of Christianity. I think a corrupted view of Christianity, a perverted view of Christianity, a view of Christianity rooted in hate, rooted in just single-minded issue thinking and not being complex or deep. I'm thinking about abortion rights, for example. And it's the grip that has on our society is why things take so little to progress. So basura to the grip that Christianity has on folks and their ability to think critically.
Okay. And let's talk about, I want to talk about the same thing, which is the debate. Let's stay on that because that is what my inspiración is this week. So, I have to say I didn't really start this year out being like a super hardcore Harris fan. I didn't start the year out that way. But I have to say, watching her on this stage, I noticed right away the level of nervousness that she had. Maybe I was reading into it, but the first 5 minutes, she seemed so nervous. And then she just got going and was making some really crucial points. And there were some moments where she kind of evaded the question and things like that. But there were some really big, also strong moments where she made some really strong points. And I was just thinking, like, this is a real person. This is a real woman who is on this stage, right? A woman of color on this stage, knowing that people who are watching do not necessarily approve, that he's got a lot of fans watching. This person is right next to her. He has said some terrible things about her and so on. And I just felt the way she conducted herself in that debate was just so inspiring, even down to the handshake, which is something that she did not have to do and kind of chose to do. And so it was a really nice example for me of what can be done despite it being hard and despite being nervous. So inspiración from Harris this week.
Yeah, and as you're saying that you didn't start the year being a hardcore Harris fan, I would say that I get so energized. Like it is incremental, but really anytime I see a woman rise to power and I see the misogyny just be relentless, that's the more that I double down and I get excited. That's what happened when Hillary ran. It's not like I was like she was like my favorite person on earth, but when I saw all the misogyny, it really just fuels me up, right? So I hope that also is what is happening. I hope that people feel extra energized after this debate and how she handled herself and how this tool again, right? This tool didn't even look at her. He didn't even call her, vice president. He's just he is so disrespectful to her. And I hope that women notice that and that we get serious about electing Kamala Harris. And of course, to the point about evading questions, we know that there is not a satisfactory response to what's happening in Gaza. We know that neither of these candidates are perfect. And really, it's more of a function of what kind of country we have, right? We don't have the country that we want. So in the context of the environment in which we are in, what I don't want to keep hearing is that these people are exactly the same. They're definitely different, and we need to everybody send some money. Y'all donate $5. And if you don't want to, if it makes your stomach churn to give it to the Democrats, give it to abortion causes, give it to a state where there's people voting, organizing for civic engagement. There's so many voter registration efforts. You don't have to give to the Democrats. You don't have to give to Harris directly, but get involved in some way. So I guess that's my inspiration. But a little side note too is that I've been rewatching Girls from HBO's Girls that I watched way back when it came out back in 2014. But I'm realizing I didn't have HBO consistently, so I'm catching up with a lot of old episodes, and it's wonderful. So rewatching old shows has also been a little bit inspirational.
I'm gonna rewatch it because I watched it when it came out, and it has been a while, and I'm interested to see kind of how it holds up.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely a couple little moments that you can see how we've evolved in the way we talk about certain things, but it still holds up. It really does still hold up. I think Lena Dunham really captured, especially you as someone that lived in New York, I'd be extra curious about how it felt, but I think it really captured that age when you're like in your early 20s, you think you've got everything figured out, but you really, really don't.
You really, really don't. Yeah.
You really, really, really don't. It's
that's why I like rewatching Broad City, even though Broad City's like a whole, like it's really comedic and ridiculous and fun. Girls is kind of like that, but takes a more serious tone sometimes.
100%. I love Broad City. Another great one. Guess what they have in common? Women. All right. With that, thank you for listening, and there'll be a couple more episodes left, so get in touch with us if you ever have feedback, if you want to learn more about working with us, you know how to reach us. It's contact@tamarindopodcast.com. With that, Delcy, pon tu suéter.
Saludos a la familia.
Tamarindo Podcast is Brenda Gonzalez and Delcy Sandoval. We are also the show's executive producers. Jeff Ricars wrote our theme song. Sonoro Media's Karina Riverol provides production support, and Cliva Torres edits our episodes for YouTube. The best way to support our work is to rate and review Tamarindo or share an episode with a friend. Get in touch with us at tamarindopodcast.com.